Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a couple of signings, some more injury updates, and some more off-season rumors, this time about the Washington Capitals, who have been surprisingly eliminated, and the Vancouver Canucks. What could they be doing in the off-season? We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. As usual, I'll kick things off today by discussing a couple of entry-level contract signings that have happened. There have been a few more around the NHL. I want to get to a couple here with the Flyers, the Red Wings, and the Blackhawks. We'll start with the Philadelphia Flyers, as they have signed 2020 second-round pick Emil Andre to a 3-year entry-level contract. They'll have an average annual value of $903,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next season. Now, for Andre, he's been playing in the SHL over the past few seasons. He's a really good defender, plays on the left side, he's done really well over the past few seasons. Had 9 goals and 33 points in 41 games last year over in Allsvenskan. He went over to the SHL this year. Did a little bit worse, but still did quite well in the SHL, putting up 6 goals and 26 points in 51 games. So he hasn't done overly bad this season. I think Andre definitely seems to have an NHL future. He's probably going to play maybe one more year over in Sweden, and then maybe 1 or 2 more years in the AHL. But I think in 2 to 3 years' time, he could definitely push for like a third pair spot for the Flyers. So he's definitely been developing for a while. He was a 2020 second-round pick, so a pick from a couple of years ago. So good to see him get his entry-level contract. Like I said, don't think it's going to happen soon, but I think in time he should definitely be a good third-pair defenseman. So, good signing for the Philadelphia Flyers. The Detroit Red Wings have signed 2 different players to their NHL roster. Start with the forward that they signed, as the Red Wings have signed 2021 third-round pick Carter Mazur to a 3-year entry-level contract with an AAV of $906,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next season. Now, for Mazur, he's been playing over in the NCAA, actually done quite well, putting up 14 goals and 38 points in 41 games last year. Really solid season from him. Even better this year, putting up a lot more pucks into net, getting 22 goals and 37 points in 40 games. So he seems like he's a really good winger for the Detroit Red Wings, plays on the left side. So in time, I think he should definitely be getting an NHL role. I think for the next year or two, he'll probably continue to develop in the AHL. So don't think that he will be making the NHL lineup right out of the gate. But I think in time, he goes to develop in the minors, he gets a little bit better. In time, I think he could definitely be a good third line forward for the Red Wings. So definitely a good pickup for the Red Wings, bringing in a third-round pick from not too long ago. And they also bring in a highly touted prospect in William Wallinder, as he was also a 2020 second-round pick, just like Andre with Philadelphia. And they signed Wallinder to a 3-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $925,000, and just like the other two, it will begin at the start of next season. So for Wallinder, he's a really good player. He's definitely seems like he has a huge NHL future. I would think he probably still needs maybe 1 year in the AHL before he starts challenging for a roster spot, but I think probably as early as 2 years from now, I would definitely think that Wallinder has a shot at making the NHL roster. I think in time he should definitely be a solid top 4 defenseman for the Red Wings. So good to see him finally get under contract. He's definitely spent a few years developing in the SHL, so good to see him sign his entry-level contract with the Red Wings, and hopefully he can make the most of it. And finally, here with the Chicago Blackhawks, they signed center Antti Cirella, who was a 2019 4th-round pick, to a 2-year entry-level contract that have an average annual value of $896,000. Now for Cirella, he's been playing over in Liga. He seems like he could still be a really good forward for them. Had 12 goals and 19 points in 37 games last year over in Liga. He's done a tad bit worse this year, putting up 7 goals and 18 points in 41 games. So once again, not too bad, but not overly great. So hopefully for Cirella, he plays 1 more year in Liga, maybe 1 or 2 more years in the AHL, and then I think in time he could definitely be a good bomb 6 forward for the Chicago Blackhawks. So definitely I think the addition of Cirella to the Blackhawks is going to be good. I do think that it's possible he doesn't get to the NHL in the next couple of years, but I do think it's still also possible that he carves himself out a nice bomb 6 role for the Blackhawks. So good to see him get signed. He was a draft pick from back in 2019, so he's definitely been developing for quite a while now. So I do think the Hawks signing him is really good, and I think in time he could be a good 3rd, 4th line forward for the Hawks. So good sign for the Hawks to get a good young bomb 6 forward now under contract. Good to see the Red Wings get Wallinder under contract. I think he should definitely be a good top 4 defenseman. Also good to see the Red Wings get Mazur locked up. He seems to be a good, maybe third, fourth line left winger. And also good to see another 2020 second rounder in Emil Andre get locked up, as I think anytime he could definitely be helping that Flyers D-Corp. So good to see all four of these guys get signed with their NHL clubs, and hopefully they continue to develop and in the not too distant future get into some NHL action. Now that's all the signings we're going to get to today. Next we go over to the injury update part of the video. We'll start with the Nashville Predators, as they've had a few injury updates, as Matt Duchene, Jeremy Lauzon, and Cole Smith are all out right now due to injuries. Now for Duchene, he's currently out week to week right now with an upper body injury. Not great news. Duchene's definitely been one of the Predators' better offensive forwards this year. Not to the extent he did last year when he had a really great season, but definitely he's still done really well this year. So I do wonder if he could be out for the season with the week to week timeline. There's only a week and a half left in the regular season before we start playoffs. So I do really wonder if he maybe has played his final game of the season. Also does depend on how far the Predators go. Predators are in a really heated race right now for a wildcard spot with the Calgary Flames and the Winnipeg Jets. So I think it is possible that Duchene could be back even in the regular season, but it just depends on how quickly he can recover from his injury. So not going to guarantee he makes the roster before the regular season ends, but it is a possibility. I think it would be even more of a possibility for him to get back if the Predators do make the playoffs. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but for the time being, it does look like Duchene could have played his final game of the regular season. As for Jeremy Lauzon, he's also suffered upper body injury. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time. I wouldn't think he's going to be out too long, but given the fact his timeline's unknown, it does really make it hard to decipher when he could be back. If he's out for the next few weeks, he's definitely going to miss the rest of the season. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but Lauzon's definitely done really well with the Predators this year. Good, solid, one of their leaders in the hit category. So definitely think that losing Lauzon for the next little while is not going to be great, possibly for the season. So hopefully Lauzon can get back in the near future and get into game action, but just bad news to lose him as well. And then with Cole Smith, he's done really well as being a good bomb 6 forward, but he's also suffered upper body injury, but he's only out day to day. So with Smith only being out day to day, I wouldn't expect him to be out for an overly long period of time. Smith has definitely done really well as the fourth, third line forward for the Predators, so losing him is not going to be good, but it's not as dire as losing a guy like Lauzon or Duchene. And I do think Smith, of the three, is the most likely to get back before the season ends. So not great news to see Smith go down with an injury, but I think they should make do without him. But to lose Duchene, who's a really good top 6 forward, and Lauzon, who's a really good third pair defenseman, as they're pushing for a playoff spot right now, is not great news. And hopefully all three of these guys can get back in the not too distant future. As for the Ottawa Senators, they've had a few injury updates, as Ridley Gregg and Cam Talbot have returned to game action. But Thomas Chabot and Derek Brassard are both going to be out for a long-term period due to injuries. So for Talbot, he was diagnosed with another injury just after coming back from his injury. In early March, was designated to be out for about 3 weeks, and he's been out for about 3 weeks, and now he's returned. So good to see Talbot get back. The Sens have had to run with guys like Sogard and Mandelius while he's been out, so that has been overly ideal given the fact neither of those two have any significant NHL experience. And I think that could be one of the reasons why the Sens fell out of the playoff race. Definitely a lot of injuries, but I think not having their starting goaltender was one of the big reasons. So not great news. Ottawa still has a slim chance of making the playoffs, so maybe the addition of Talbot helps them trying to get to the playoffs. But definitely great news to see Talbot get back, and if anything, Talbot's going to try and show that he can still be a good starting goaltender before his contract expires in the offseason. So good to see Talbot get back. Ridley Gregg was only out for about a week due to an upper body injury, so good to see Gregg get back. I think adding Gregg to the lineup is really good. He's definitely shown he can be a good middle 6 forward this year, and I think next year he should definitely be taking an NHL role right away. So I think Gregg getting back is really good for Ottawa, with the Sens most likely not making the playoffs. He can definitely get a chance to show that he's earned a spot for next year on the team. So I definitely think this is amazing news for the Ottawa Senators, and I think getting Gregg back is a huge win. As for the other two who have been injured, Thomas Chabot's out week to week with an upper body injury. Now that's not great news. Chabot's definitely their best defender. He's been in and out of the lineup over the past couple weeks due to his injuries, so not great news to see him go down with an injury. And with the season only a week and a half away, if he doesn't return in the next week and a half, he's going to miss the rest of the season. So not great news for Chabot. It's quite possible the season's likely done. So hopefully if he does miss the season, he's back for training camp next year, which I think is a really strong possibility. But definitely not great news to lose Chabot. And then as for Derek Brassard, he suffered a really bad leg injury over the weekend, and he's going to now be out for the season. So not great news for Brassard. He's done a really good job of being a really good, productive bomb six forward for the Ottawa Senators this year. So losing him for the season is not great. And there's a lot of questions about Brassard's future now. If he'll retire, if he'll try and sign on another one-year deal somewhere else in the offseason. But just not great news to see Brassard go down with a leg injury that'll keep him out for the rest of the season. So bad news for Brassard and Chabot, as Brassard's going to miss the rest of the season. Chabot's most likely also going to miss the rest of the season. But good to see Talbot and Gregg get back. And hopefully the addition of Talbot and Gregg can help Ottawa with their slim playoff hopes. Next was the New York Islanders. They've had a few injury updates. As Oliver Wahlstrom has had an injury update, Alex Romanov has suffered an injury, but Sebastian Aho has recovered from his injury. Now for Aho, he only missed about 2 weeks due to an upper body injury, and he's gone back into game action. Aho's been a really good third pair defenseman playing on the left side this year for the Islanders, so definitely been a really good addition to the Islanders organization. I think having him on the third line really strengthens that D-Corp, so good to see him get back to game action. Over with Alexander Romanov, not too significant of an injury. Also dealing with upper body injury right now and out day-to-day, so not great news for Romanov. He's definitely been a really solid top four defenseman in his first season with the Islanders. So not great news to see him go down with an injury, but it's only day-to-day, so hopefully he's only out for like a couple of games and he can be back before the season ends. But just not great news to see Romanov go down with the injury. And lastly, with Oliver Wahlstrom, there was a lot of speculation that this was possible, but now we know for sure that Oliver Wahlstrom is going to be out for the season with his lower body injury. So Wahlstrom hasn't played since late December due to his injuries. He's missed over 3 months, so not surprising to see that Wahlstrom's going to miss at least the rest of the season, but really bad news for him as he was having quite a good season playing with a guy like Matthew Barzal. So not great news to see Wahlstrom go down with the injury, but not good news to see Wahlstrom's going to be out for the season or that Romanov's going to be out for the next few days, but it is good to see Aho get back into the lineup for the Islanders as they continue for their playoff push. And last with the Anaheim Ducks, they've had a couple of injury updates, as Adam Henrique, John Gibson, and Trevor Zegras have all returned from their injuries. Now for Zegras and Gibson, they were only out for a short period of time, as both were dealing with lower body injuries. Zegras was only out for just under a week, only missed about a game or two. Gibson was only out for a couple of days, didn't miss any games, so good to see both of those two not have too significant of an injury. Zegras is a really good top six forward. Gibson's the Ducks starting goaltender this year, so good to see those two players didn't have significant injuries and they were able to get right back into game action. So good for both of those guys. Henrique's been out for the past month due to a lower body injury as well, so good to see him get back. There was a lot of talk that he could have been moved around the deadline, but due to that injury, it really did throw a wrench into those plans. So it hasn't been great to see Henrique go down with the injury, but good to see him get back into game action. Hopefully Henrique can make the best of these last 5 games with the Ducks for this year, and then maybe he ends up getting dealt in the offseason with only a year left on his contract. But definitely I think getting Henrique back off of injury reserve, great news for the Ducks, but also pretty good to see Gibson and Zegras not be out for too long. And while the Ducks are eliminated and in the Connor Bedard race, hopefully these 3 additions will help the Ducks finish their season strong. That's all the injury updates I'm going to get to today. Quickly before we go over to the off-season rumor and preview part of the video, I do want to quickly discuss some more teams going to the playoffs who have clinched a playoff spot and eliminations. I didn't really go over this in the last video, but as we saw, Philadelphia has been eliminated from the playoff contention, as has St. Louis. The Capitals and the Canucks have all also been eliminated from playoff contention. So I don't think the Canucks are too much of a surprise, as are St. Louis. Really not too much of a surprise that Philly is. But I do think it's a little bit of a surprise that the Caps did wind up missing. They made the playoffs for the past 9 straight years, so quite surprising that we're going to have a playoffs without the Washington Capitals for the first time since 2014. So definitely been a long time since the Capitals have missed the playoffs. And we'll get to all of their off-season rumors and news in a couple of minutes. But some more teams who have clinched playoff spots since the last time we talked about this. The Tampa Bay Lightning in the East have clinched a playoff spot, thus making the 6th spot. The top 3 in both sides are going to be making the playoffs now. In the Atlantic, you have Boston, Toronto, Tampa being the top three. We also have a first confirmed matchup for the playoffs, which will be Toronto and Tampa, a rematch of last year's first round matchup, which is going to be an exciting series to watch, in my opinion. But you also have, in the Metro Division, Carolina, New York, or New Jersey, all having clinched top three spots in the Metro. So the top three spots in each division are now locked up. It's basically who's going to get into the last wildcard spots. You have the Florida Panthers, the New York Islanders, the Pittsburgh Penguins, all really close in together. I think Buffalo's most likely going to miss the playoffs, but they still have a really good outside shot with only being 6 points out right now. They do still have 2 games in hand, so if they can hope that a couple of those teams slip up in those last few games and they can make good on those few games in hand, maybe Buffalo makes the playoffs. But definitely going to be interesting to see who gets those last 2 wildcard spots in the East. As for the West, all 6 teams, the 3 in each division, have clinched spots as well. In the Pacific, you have the Vegas Golden Knights, the Los Angeles Kings, the Edmonton Oilers, who have clinched playoff spots. In the Central side, you have the Avalanche, the Stars, the Wild. There's definitely no runaway division winners right now. It's a really, really heated battle between Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota in the Central, Vegas, Edmonton in the Pacific, also possibly LA. So good to see all 6 of these teams really fighting for the division titles. It sort of looks right now like Vegas could possibly be the conference winner, but it's definitely too early to say that for certainty. As for the 2 wildcard positions, Seattle could clinch a playoff spot later today if they are able to beat the Arizona Coyotes, so that would be definitely a huge upgrade for them. After finishing with a bottom 3 record last year, making the playoffs in only their second season would be a really big win for Seattle. And if they do wind up making the playoffs and clinching a playoff spot, which I don't think it would be too surprising if not today, then probably over the weekend, then you have 3 teams left in the West who are fighting for a playoff spot. You have the Predators, the Flames, and the Jets all fighting for the second wildcard spot. So that's another interesting race we're going to have to find out. But definitely, 12 spots have been clinched to go to the playoffs, and there's only 4 spots left. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see who gets those final 4 spots to make it to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And lastly, here we go over to the off-season rumor part of the video. Now, I've been going over a few teams over the past few videos. Today I want to touch on the Capitals and the Canucks. So we'll start with the Vancouver Canucks as they were the first of the 2 eliminated. So I don't think it's too surprising the Canucks were eliminated. I know when I was making my season predictions in the off-season, just before the season got underway, I did predict Vancouver to probably miss the playoffs, but I didn't expect them to do this bad. So the Canucks have not done overly well this year. They're probably going to get a top 10 pick. Right now, it sort of looks like that. So hopefully they can hit home on that top 10 pick. But if you look at their team, offensively, they've not done overly bad. They're currently the 11th team in goal scoring, so they have not done half bad on the goal scoring department. And on the power play, they're 12th. So they're definitely not had any trouble scoring goals this year. Definitely had no trouble putting pucks in the net. There have been a lot of different contributors to that factor, but they have a really deep forward group, so definitely have a really stacked forward group I think helps with their ability to score goals. As for the defensive end, it hasn't been overly great. They're a bottom 5 team in the penalty kill. They're a 6th lowest right now in the goals against department, so not a great season so far this year from the defensive end. And I know their defense has probably been the glaring weakness on this team. They've also had a lot of injuries to deal with, especially the long injury to Thatcher Demko, which I think really hurt this team. I know Demko wasn't playing too well when he got injured, but still losing him for just over a couple of months was not great news for the Vancouver Canucks, and I think also really was a key factor in why they did so poorly on the defensive end this year. But I think there's definitely a few ways that they could improve this team in the offseason. Now, if you look at their roster, goaltending-wise, I think it's still a possibility Demko's traded. I don't think it's a guarantee, as I think that the Canucks are still trying to go to a retool and try and get back into the playoff race for next year, which I'm not exactly sure is the best move, but I think if it's the move that they're going to go through, they're most likely not going to move Demko. They're still going to need another goaltender if they're going to try and push for a playoff spot next year, but I do still wonder if they possibly try and consider trading Demko. If they do move Demko, who will have 3 years left at a $5 million cap hit, they do wonder if they try and bring in someone else, like maybe a goaltender who's available via another trade. Maybe they take some of the assets they get for a Demko trade and flip them to another team to get a good goaltender. I know there's a lot of talk that maybe a John Gibson could be available this offseason. Carter Hart would be an interesting one. Jordan Binnington, as we talked about in the last video, I think could be moved if the Blues feel that they could definitely make do without him. So I definitely think there's a few options out there for Vancouver, but I think Demko being moved is possible. But if Demko was to be moved, they would have to have some sort of a solution for their starting goaltender role. I think in time, maybe Silovs, who's a good AHL goalie right now, could be their starting goaltender, but that's not for a couple of years' time. So they're definitely going to need a plan in place before they trade Demko to sort of fill out that starting role net. And they'll probably also need a backup this year. Delia is going to be gone. Martin never really did well this year. So I do wonder if they try and fill out a backup role maybe in free agency. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see. As for the defensive core, I think that's where the most work needs. Now, I think Ethan Bear, Travis Dermott, both pending up restricted free agents, most likely re-sign with the Canucks. I think if they could sign him to not too cheap, maybe 3 or 4 year deals, I think that would be really good. They're definitely keeping Hughes. Hughes is a really talented defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks. As much as they would most likely want to move on from him via buyout or whatever, I definitely think that Oliver Ekman-Larsson will most likely want remaining with the Canucks. He's got 4 years left at a very high cap, and I don't think any teams will want to have that right now. And I don't think that the Canucks are really willing to pay a buyout right now. So, in my eyes, they probably keep Oliver Ekman-Larsson for this year. Even though I think it's possible he gets bought out, I think it's more likely that he remains with the Canucks for this year. So definitely going to be interesting to see about that front. But if they have OEL, they have Hughes, they have Bear, they have Dermott. They also have Veronik, who they recently just signed, who's going to go into the final year of his deal. This is still a decent enough defensive group. They think they could definitely still get it done. So in my opinion, a couple of situations to watch would be Tyler Myers. There was a lot of talk around the deadline that he most likely wouldn't be dealt to the trade line, which he wasn't. But that after July 1st, when he's paid his bonus, his contract becomes a lot more easier to take on. Maybe that's when he gets moved. So I'll definitely be watching out for a Myers trade from Vancouver. Also, Jack Rathbone. He's definitely been getting a lot of playing time this year. But I think if he was to remain with the Canucks, he would have to get at least some playing time next year. Maybe starting as a 7th defenseman and getting into some games throughout the season. But I think if they don't see a future with Rathbone, who's going to be entering the final year of his deal, then I think they have to probably move Rathbone in a trade. So definitely going to see, I think, moving Myers and Rathbone as possibilities and probably likely to happen. And I think if they could maybe add one more top 4 defenseman who could help maybe right behind Hughes on the left side, I think that this team could definitely refix their defensive woes from this year. So I think that could definitely be an improvement for the Canucks. As for the forward group, you still have some really great players there, but I do think there's definitely going to be a few guys moved out. So if you look at it, Pettersson, Kuzmenko, Beauvillier, really good top line in my opinion, that should start next year. You also have guys like Podkolzin, Höglander, Beauvillier, Kravtsov, who I think have done fantastic this year, and will round out their top 9 wingers. So if that's the case, I don't see Boeser or Garland returning to the Canucks next year. I think both guys will wind up getting dealt around the draft or in free agency sometime in the offseason. Garland and Boeser are both still really good middle 6 forwards who could definitely play on second lines for a contending team. Garland's not making too much money. Boeser's not producing up to his contract value, but I think if the Canucks can find some offers for these two, I think both those guys will be moved. I think the Miller situation is definitely going to be one to watch. If Miller gets moved, like we saw some of these guys reporting just after the trade line, they would most likely want a good young center. So if the Canucks were able to get a good young center for Miller, I think they would definitely trade him. But if they weren't able to do that, or if they couldn't find a trade before his no movement clause kicks in, I think they're most likely going to be stuck with him. So definitely, I think Miller remaining with the Canucks is a possibility. But I also think him being traded before his no movement clause kicks in is also a possibility. But if they were to, they would have to get a good young center who can play second or third line center minutes for this team. So definitely think it's possible. But definitely, I think if they can do some of these things, maybe put a younger guy like Linus Karlsson or Aiden McDonough as a third line center, maybe this team can improve enough before the start of next season to definitely push for a playoff spot. So definitely, I think Demko's one to keep your eye on. And if they do wind up moving Demko, definitely keep an eye out to see if they would to move some assets to try and get another starting goaltender. Some other guys look out for Myers possibly being traded, Boeser, Garland, maybe Rathbone, a possibility of JT Miller. I mean, this Canucks team is definitely going to be moving some guys out. I mean, they're over the cap for the start of next season, so someone's going to have to go, and I think they'll probably want to try and add to that blue line, and they still have to sign Bear and Dermott. So, in my opinion, Myers, Garland, Boeser for sure getting moved. in my opinion. Maybe Miller, maybe Rathbone. If they don't feel that he's going to be a good defender for them in the next few seasons, maybe Demko. So I definitely think this is going to be an interesting team to watch. I just think the Canucks are trying to retool, and as much as I don't think that's the right scenario for them, I think they should have gone for a rebuild. If they are going to retool, they're going to definitely need to do some more moves in the offseason. So Canucks definitely going to be a really interesting team to watch. As for the Capitals, quite surprising they were eliminated. When I made my predictions just before the season started for the regular season, I did expect the Caps to miss the playoffs and be one of the lower teams in the Metro, so I am quite surprised that I really was close to that, and they do miss the playoffs. It's going to be quite weird to see the Eastern Conference playoffs play out without the Capitals in them, but if you look at the Caps stats this year, they've been average for most of the season. They are 13th lowest in goal scoring. They are 15th highest in goals against. So once again, just middle of the pack tier right now. If you look at their power play, they're also 15th in the NHL. If you look at their PK, they're 6th. So they're definitely a really average team this year. They just weren't able to get enough push in a really challenging Eastern Conference to make the playoffs. Now, what could they sort of do in the offseason? Now, I know that there have been some who have said that the Caps should go for a rebuild or something. And while Ovechkin's chasing Gretzky's record and still on that Capitals team, they're not going to go for a rebuild. That's just not going to happen. So I would expect some sort of a retool for the Capitals. In goal, I would probably expect not any changes. They still have Lindgren and Kemper signed past this year. Both of them all right this year. I think Lindgren's actually done quite well as a backup. Kemper's done all right as a good starter, so I think they'd probably just continue with those two guys next year. If you look at their defensive end, a lot more clear situation now than there was at the beginning of the season. When we started the year for the Capitals, only John Carlson was signed past this offseason, with a guy like Martin Fehervary and RFA. But now you have Carlson signed. You also just signed Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Nick Jensen, which really shores up that right side. They acquired Rasmus Sandin, which gives them another good top 4 left shot defenseman. So in my opinion, maybe they add like another left shot defenseman, either via trade or free agency, to improve that team. But I definitely think that maybe just adding another defenseman could be what the Capitals do and re-sign Fehervary. But I think now that they've signed Jensen and Trevor Van Riemsdyk to play like second and third pair minutes. They got Sandin from Toronto at the deadline. I think this team looks a little bit more better for next year, but I definitely still think they could probably add maybe 1 or 2 more bodies on the defensive end to try and improve this team even more. And as for the forward group, I think that's where the most change is going to come from. If you look at this team, Tom Wilson's going to be entering the final year of his deal. I don't think he'll be moved. I think he'll be more likely re-signed with the Capitals than moved. Backstrom, Ovechkin, who also make part of that top line, not going anywhere. But I think the middle 6 is going to be the most interesting spot. I mean, you have guys like Bell, Protas, Dowd, who can play good 4th line minutes. I think those guys are most likely going to play there. You have Strome, who's definitely looked like a good 2nd line center this year for the Capitals, who they just inked to a 5-year extension, so he's probably going to be 2nd line center. You can have Milano and Oshie as like middle 6 wingers, moving them 2nd or 3rd line. But in my opinion, I think Kuznetsov and Mantha's time in Washington is coming to an end. Mantha's going to be entering the final year of his deal. After guys like Wilson and Backstrom got back, he's been playing majority of the season in the bottom 6, sometimes even being at healthy scratch. And I don't think they want to pay $5 million to a player who's sitting on the bench most of the time. So I think Mantha is going to be a very likely trade option for the Washington Capitals in the offseason, so maybe give them some more cap flexibility. There's also been a lot of talk that maybe Evgeny Kuznetsov could be moved. Definitely having a down year points production-wise, only having like 57 points when he's usually putting up 70 or 80. So it has been a down year for Kuznetsov. Also, once Backstrom got back, Strome was doing really good at 2nd line center. Kuznetsov's been playing bottom 6 minutes as well. So I think trades for Kuznetsov and Mantha are really likely. Just train them to a place where they could have some more opportunity. I think Kuznetsov could definitely improve a lot of teams' 2nd line centers. I think Mantha could definitely still be a good middle 6 power forward, so definitely think Mantha and Kuznetsov are going to be dealt. And if those two are dealt, I think they could definitely go out and acquire someone in free agency. I think Lapierre and McMichael, who are their top prospects in the system, who can definitely help their team next year, I think could also get NHL opportunities next year. I know McMichael's definitely been up and down the lineup over the past few seasons, but I think McMichael and or Lapierre could definitely have like a 3rd line role next year with the team. I also do wonder if they try and go out either via free agency or trade to try and replace some of these guys. I think if they do move Kuznetsov and Mantha, they'll probably have 3 or 4 players that they'll need to sign for the middle 6. So I would definitely think that, along with the possibility of calling up Lapierre and McMichael, I think it's also a really good possibility that they could try and acquire a center or a couple of wingers in free agency or via trade. So definitely going to be interesting to see. I don't think that Kuznetsov and Mantha are most likely guys to be traded, and I definitely think that if they could add another top four defenseman, if they could maybe add a couple of middle six wingers, maybe a middle six center, then this team could definitely be competing for a playoffs yet again next year. But definitely would like to hear what you think down in the comments. Does Kuznetsov or Mantha get traded? Do the Capitals try and improve this team to make the team better for next year? And which Canuck player do you think will be the ones to be traded in the offseason? Will it be Boeser, Garland, Myers, Demko, Miller? We'd love to hear who you think the Canucks will be trading. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I will link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.